I'm going to tell you something most men refuse to believe their entire lives. The world owes you nothing, not success, not wealth, not respect. The moment I truly understood this, everything changed. I was already building the empire that would transform America, but it took me years to realize that the greatest machine I ever built wasn't the Model T. It was myself. You want to know what really determines your future? Look in the mirror. That's it. The answer is painfully simple. Everything else, the economy, the government, your employer, the stock market, your family's opinion of you, it's all wind. And the wind blows wherever it wants. I learned this the hard way, watching the men in my factories blame everything but themselves for where they were in life. They cursed the hours, the wages, they cursed me. But the men who rose, they cursed nothing. They changed. When I was young, before the world knew my name, I made the same mistake most men do. I believed circumstances determined destiny. I thought that if conditions were right, if I had more capital, if investors understood, if technology were better, then I could do what needed to be done. I waited for the world to change for me. What arrogance, what foolishness. The world does not change for anyone. You either change for the world, or you're left behind. Let me talk to you about value, because almost no one understands it anymore. Your time has no value. I don't care how many hours you work. I don't care how exhausted you are at the end of the day. The market does not pay you for your time. It pays you for the value you provide. That is the one unchanging law of economics, and it does not care about your feelings. I could have swept floors 18 hours a day and died poor. Instead, I spent 18 hours a day solving problems no one else could solve. And I built an empire. When I designed the assembly line, people thought I was obsessed with efficiency. They were right. But they didn't understand why. It wasn't about making cars faster. It was about multiplying value. A man working alone might build a car in weeks, but that same man, placed correctly inside a system I designed, could contribute to producing 100 cars in the same time. Did his hours change? No. Did his market value change? Absolutely. And his wages followed. Here's what they never teach you. You could become twice as valuable without working twice as hard. You can become 10 times as valuable without working 10 times longer. The issue isn't effort, it's evolution. Every time I walked into my workshop, I asked myself one question. Am I better than I was yesterday? Not in some vague motivational sense, but specifically. Did I learn something new about metallurgy? Did I solve a problem in the ignition system? Did I understand my workers better? Did I read something that changed how I think about production? I kept daily journals, stacks of them. Visitors to my estate saw them and thought I was writing history. I wasn't. I was documenting transformation, every idea, every failure that taught me something, every conversation that shifted my perspective. I wrote it down because I knew this. Memory is a liar. It smooths the edges. It makes you forget how ignorant you once were. My journals kept me honest. In my own handwriting, they showed me how little I knew 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Do you think you're the same person you were last year? You're not. The real question is this. Did you improve, or did you decline? Most people decline without noticing. They stop learning. They stop questioning themselves. They cling to certainty. And certainty is the enemy of growth. I never allowed myself certainty. Even when I was proven right, I assumed I was missing something. Most of the time I was. Every failure, for me, was a form of success. The Bible taught me this, though most people read it wrong. They think it's only about morality. It is. But it's also about patterns. Patterns of success. Patterns of failure. Joseph in Egypt stored grain during abundance and became invaluable during famine. He didn't work harder than everyone else. He thought differently. He prepared. He positioned himself to deliver value at the exact moment value was desperately needed. That isn't luck. That is understanding systems. I read everything I could get my hands on. Think and Grow Rich, the richest man in Babylon. Not because I needed motivation. I already had plenty. I read them because even the wealthiest man can learn something from how other successful men think. Napoleon Hill understood something critical. Your mind is either your greatest asset or your greatest weakness. There is no middle ground. If you fill it with excuses, complaints, and fantasies about how the world should be, you stay exactly where you are. If you fill it with principles, strategies, and observations about how the world actually works, you rise. Here's what no one wants to hear. Unless you change, the next 6 years of your life will look exactly like the last 6. Unless the economy changes, unless you get a better boss, unless your spouse becomes more supportive. In short, unless you change. I've seen this thousands of times. Men come to work for me, and within 6 months, I can predict their future. The blamers will be in the same position 5 years later, bitter and confused. The learners will become foremen, then managers, then owners of their own businesses. The difference isn't intelligence. I've met brilliant men who died broke, and average men who became wealthy. The difference is an obsession with self-improvement. Successful men see themselves as products under development. They invest in themselves. They practice. They seek people smarter than they are and extract every lesson possible. They don't network for comfort. They network for challenge. They want to be around people who make them feel inadequate, because that feeling is rocket fuel. I learned as much from failure as from success. More, actually. Success can make you lazy. It whispers that you figured everything out. Failure screams that you haven't. Before Ford Motor Company, I had ventures that collapsed. Those failures taught me more than any book ever could, about cash flow, partnerships, and the gap between vision and execution. If those earlier companies had succeeded, I likely would have stayed small. I needed failure to learn what truly mattered. When my teacher told me to focus more on myself than on my job, it sounded abstract. Then I understood. Jobs are temporary. Skills are permanent. A company can fire you, go bankrupt, get acquired, or become obsolete. But if you spent those years developing yourself, your thinking, your skills, your network, your reputation, you are valuable anywhere. You are not dependent on one employer or one industry. You are a walking business. I turned my automobile company into a university without walls. Every worker learned not just their task, but the principles behind it. Why? Because a man who understands principles can adapt. A man who only knows routines becomes a slave to them. When we introduced new models, new techniques, new machines, those with understanding thrived. Those who memorized steps struggled. Here's a secret they won't tell you. The system rewards evolution, not loyalty. It rewards value creation, not years of service. You can stay loyal to a company for 30 years and get a gold watch. Or you can be valuable to the market and become wealthy. Most people choose loyalty because it feels safer. It isn't. Companies fail. Industries collapse. Real security comes from being a person who can create value anywhere, anytime, under any conditions. I've watched economic crises destroy people, not because they lost money, but because they lost their ability to create value. They became dependent on specific conditions. When those conditions changed, they had nothing. Meanwhile, those who had invested in skills, knowledge, networks, and reputation rebuilt, often bigger than before. Your future is not determined by the economy, not by politics, technology, or social trends. All of that is wind. Your future is determined by the quality of the sail you build, and that sail is you, your mind, your skills, your discipline, your character. You can't control the wind, but you can always adjust the sail. I tell you this because I wasted years waiting for perfect conditions. They never came. I finally started when conditions were terrible. And you know what I discovered? Conditions are always terrible for something. There's always a reason to wait, always an excuse to delay. The successful ones are those who build anyway. They don't wait for permission or perfect timing. They work with what they have, learn what they need, and become so valuable the world is forced to notice. Money follows value the way water flows downhill. It's not personal, it's physics. If you are valuable to the market, money will find you. If you're not, it doesn't matter how hard you work, how much you deserve it, or how unfair the system feels. You can rage about inequality all you want, but the market is the most democratic force that exists. It doesn't care about your past, your credentials, or your intentions. It cares about one thing only. Can you solve my problem? That's what I did. I solved transportation for the average person. Before me, automobiles were toys for the wealthy. I made them accessible. Did I do it out of charity? No. I did it because I saw a massive gap between what people needed and what they could access. I placed myself in that gap and filled it. That is value creation. That is how you change your financial future. But here's what most people miss. You cannot create that kind of value if you're the same person you were 5 years ago. You must evolve. You must put in effort. You must learn metallurgy, engineering, production systems, management, finance, marketing. You must understand human nature. You must study failure and success. You must become someone who sees and acts on opportunities others miss. So here's my message to you. Stop waiting for the world to change. Stop blaming circumstances. Stop hoping for better wins. Focus on one thing instead. Becoming better. Read until your eyes ache. Work until your mind is full. Practice until your skills become instinct. Seek people who challenge you. Document your journey so you can't lie to yourself about your progress. Keep going no matter what. Do not fall into despair. 6 years from now, you will either be in the same place you are today, or somewhere extraordinary. The only variable is you. Change yourself. Not the economy, not your boss, not your family situation. You. And if you are truly committed to investing in yourself more than your job, if you genuinely aim to become more valuable to the market every single day, everything will change. I built an empire not because I had advantages, but because I refused to stay the same. I evolved every day, relentlessly, and that made all the difference. Now the same choice stands before you. If you choose growth, you choose a different future. If you choose stagnation, you accept more of the same. The wind will blow. The only question is, what kind of sail have you built?